All right, it's time for another Quarter Notes. This is a video series that I really love to do where I talk about 4 albums that I've been really digging and really listening to, but I don't really have enough to say for a full-length album review, but I still want to talk about them. So here we go. This time I'm actually doing a little bit of a theme for this one. This is all either instrumental or I think all of them are instrumental in one way, shape, or form. Yeah, they're all instrumental albums. They're very atmospheric albums, and they're just a great time. So let's dive into them. Nights of Lust by the Lovecraft Sextet. So yeah, this one kind of came out of nowhere for me. It just randomly came on one of my streaming services recommendations, and I got really captivated by the front cover. You know, people say that don't judge an album by its front cover. Well, that's what I did here. This one is by, and I want to try it, Jason Cohen. He's from a number of different kind of, They call it like dark jazz. It reminds me of a lot of the soundtracks that like Twin Peaks would have, or some like very atmospheric horror movies would have. Like that's kind of like the overall feeling. It's very surreal, very bizarre, very avant-garde at times. You know, it does kind of blend the atmospheric, very soundscapey aspects to the jazz kind of expression, where it's very just come as you will, whatever comes goes. And that's really the overall feeling of this album as well. It's very dreamscapey. I mean, the Nights of Lust, I believe, comes from it's inspired by the 1950s Nights of Horror comic book series by Joe Shuster. And I feel that, you know, it definitely blends the two ideas of like this very, again, I keep leaning on Twin Peaks, but like if you took Twin Peaks, but like a very 1950s kind of pulp horror aspect to it. And I mean, the tracks are quite delicious. It's a smaller album, you know, only about 40 minutes or so across 7 tracks. And each one, it's very nourishing. You know, for me, like this is something that I love to listen to late at night when I'm either falling asleep or I'm reading a book and I just need something in the background just to kind of soothe me a little bit. This is the perfect album for that one. This is one that I absolutely would pick up in physical format. It's one that makes me really excited about this kind of music. And after listening to it quite a bit, I've kind of trained the algorithm to pick up on other albums that are very similar to that. So I've been enjoying kind of diving into that. So yeah. Go and check it out. If you're into this kind of music, I think you'll really enjoy yourself. Let's move on to the next one. Amazonia from Jean-Michel Jarre. So Jean-Michel Jarre is an electronical musician from the 70s from France. Really made a name for himself with his 1-2 punch of Oxygen and Equinox. Love both of those albums. I mean, I grew up with both of those. And then followed them both up with Oxygen 3 and Equinox Infinity a couple of years ago. And so I've always been on the hunt for more of this music that this guy does. And I love how he was able to really put his own namesake on this electronical style of music, and he's cultivated a huge fan base because of that. And this one is definitely a much odder expression when it comes to his music. It's much more nature oriented, being a concept album about the Amazon. And so this, again, one of the albums that I really, really do love to listen to late at night. But if you're looking for more of the structures, more of the kind of ebb and flows with Jean-Michel's playing style, you're not going to find it on this one. This one is much more of like an abstract, impressionistic, very avant-garde take on his music. Like every once in a while, it will solidify into a moment of like tangible, concrete music, but you do have to, pardon the pun, wade through the waters quite heavily to get to them. I do enjoy this album in terms of creating atmosphere. Again, if I'm trying to fall asleep late at night and I want to have some really crystal clear visuals of like deep jungle, of like deep riverside jungle, I will put this on for sure. And it's still a fantastic time, but you really do need to know what you're getting into when you're getting into this album. Because if you're not in the right frame of mind, you're just going to be sitting there being like, what the hell am I even listening to? So yeah, this is one that I don't know if I can honestly recommend. This is one that you would, like I mentioned, you have to know what you're getting into. And if you know what you're going to get into and you're ready for it and you're craving that, you're going to love this album. But if you're not in that right frame of mind, it's going to be grating. You know, it's not going to be your thing. So yeah, this is one that's definitely more of a proceed with caution. But one that if you're in the right frame of mind, it's going to do it for you. It's absolutely going to do it for you. So yeah, this is one that I would probably download. Like it's one that I want to have on my computer when I want those deep late at night grooves. But it's not going to be one that I constantly return back to. So yeah, that's what I've got. Momentum by Portico Quartet. And I was actually debating of which one I wanted to cover on this one, Terrain or Momentum. Both of these were released last year, but I've just fallen in love with these. Holy geez. So today I'm just going to concentrate on Momentum, their latest album, again, released last year. Holy geez, I've fallen in love with this thing. I was kicking myself that I didn't hear it last year because this would have easily made it onto my top 10. On the one hand, this is a very experimental, very like neoclassical album outfit. This is a band that's hailing from London, UK, that uses a lot of like very interesting dynamics in terms of their musical presentation. And each album of theirs kind of takes on a different experiment. I love this one in their use of the saxophones and their violins. And like they don't just allow the status quo to dictate how they want to perceive and present music. They really do present music how they want to lay it down. And that's why I think like the neoclassical movement that's really been taking a hold over the past like 10 years or so, it's really, really nourishing my musical expression, my musical journey. You know, like I'm always on the lookout for something that's doing something a little bit different, that's really pushing the boundaries for what music can be. And this album definitely satisfied that. The movements on here are just jaw-droppingly beautiful. And I think a part of that is, one, the length and how these tracks kind of bleed into one another. There's 10 tracks across almost 45 minutes worth of music, and really it does just provide a brilliant soundscapes for whatever it is that you're doing, whether it be background music, whether it really be like forefront, allowing yourself to be carried away kind of music. But it's also a little bit on the challenging side as well. Like this isn't your mainstream accessible kind of music. And I mean, if you're a fan of progressive rock, we've come to enjoy that. But you know, it's even in that respects, you know, it does take a little bit of time to warm up. It does take a little bit of time to really explore and test out all the little nooks and crannies on this album. And as I mentioned, I've fallen in love with this album. There are many times this past month where, you know, I've had a little bit of difficulty falling asleep, and I'll put this album on 2, sometimes even 3 times and just let the music wash over me. It's an absolute treat, one that I honestly have to recommend. Regardless of what kind of expression of music that you like to listen to, absolutely go and have a listen to it. It might not be your thing, but I'd be remiss if I didn't give this one the note seal of approval. This is one that I absolutely say run, don't walk to go and listen to, because man, it's one that the more I listen to, the more I get rewarded for. And it really does go to show how much really great music was released in 2021. This one is one that I absolutely love with my whole heart. But that's where I stand right now. And yeah, that's all I've got for it. ROM by Tangerine Dream. Okay, let's talk about Tangerine Dream. 70s, again, very electronic, very, like computer-oriented music. These guys got their start in the early 70s and just kind of took the world by storm. Every time I return to Tangerine Dream, I always get just that reaffirming of like, oh yeah, these guys are actually friggin' good. And they put out like sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 albums a year. So like, who knows? Like this is like their, I don't know, 40th album. Since their last album of Recurring Dream that was released back in 2019, they have started to slow down. And honestly, I was doing just a very quick research about this band because I'm like, are even any of their founding members still here? Like the main guy of Edgar Forsey, I think is how you pronounce. I probably butchered the last name, and I'm so sorry. His presence on the album, with the band, hasn't been felt since about the mid 2010s. So really, there's no founding members found on Tangerine Dream at all anymore. All the other ones have just kind of come and gone, and it's a bit of a revolving door after a while. Looks like this iteration of the band has been pretty solid since about the 2015-ish. It's hard. It's kind of like the ship of Theseus, right? At which point does it stop being the ship of Theseus? Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, we're talking about their latest album. We're talking about Rom, and it is surprisingly good. I know that their last handful of albums from the 2010s have been kind of hit and miss, even within the past 2 decades. I just feel like they've been really spinning their wheels without getting anywhere. Rom has really stood out from the pack, you know, like even though Recurring Dream was relatively quite better than a lot of the other stuff that they had. And Quantum Gate back in 2017 was also pretty good. I feel like this one's even better. Like the iteration of the band as they are currently are still growing, are still learning what it is to be this expression of Tangerine Dream. And I think they're starting to really solidify themselves and really figure out what it means to be Tangerine Dream in the 2020s. And I think that this one really does put a staple on the map in this case. And it's one that I applaud the band for doing. Like a lot of these legacy bands, I keep wondering, like, what are they doing still going on at this point? Do they have anything interesting to say? Or are they just trying to milk this cash cow dry? I don't feel that on this one. I feel like they do legitimately have something really interesting to say on this one. And I really did enjoy my time with this one. I haven't returned to this one quite as much as the past albums that I've mentioned. But when I do feel like I want to try something a little bit different, Rom is a great one because they've kept the spirit of what Tangerine Dream was, which was always innovating, always experimenting, and always trying something new. And they've done that here without compromising what it means to be Tangerine Dream. So I applaud them for doing this, and I think they were quite successful in it. You know, the soundscapes are still very tasty. The stretches of music are extremely fun. I do wish that there were a few more lengthy tracks off here, and they kind of condensed the album a little bit in that case, because over an hour's worth of music is a pretty big ask for any Tangerine Dream soundscapes, especially for this style of music. I do love some of the lengthier tracks, like in 256 Zyken, but I do think that they kind of spin their wheels a little bit, and I wish that they kind of had trimmed off a little bit of these tracks a little bit more, so that we had probably about 40 minutes worth of music rather than 68 minutes worth of music. But that's my only real gripe with this album. It's still a fantastic time. If you're a fan of Tangerine Dream, if you're a fan of electrical music, if you're a fan of this style of like synth oriented just experimentation, you're really going to dig it, and I love their inclusive of the violins on here. The violinist of, and I want to try this, Hoshiko Yamane, their violin playing is exquisite, and like honestly one of the main reasons why I would come to this, and it folds into the album and the Tangerine Dream sound perfectly. So yeah, all that taken into consideration though, it's still one that I probably would just download. There's enough here to really dive into and really sink your teeth into and really like digest, analyze, really like spend your time into. But yeah, that's where I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it there. And those are the 4 albums that I've got for you. What did you guys think about these ones? Which were your favorite albums that I covered? Which ones were your ones that you didn't quite like or were surprised to see on here? Let me know by commenting down below. I know that I covered a few bands on here that I normally wouldn't have, but man, I've just been loving a lot of these more ambient, avant-garde, very impressionistic, instrumental styles of music. I've been loving them. So that's all I've got for you guys. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, Notes out.